the Series 12 panel discussion, where today we are discussing Ascension of the Cybermen. Yes, I actually remembered the name of the episode this week for the first time in about 3 episodes. Today we have on Jack.
Hello.
Connor.
Hello.
And George.
Hello.
Connor and George have some excellent channels which you can check out below in the description. So, as I said, today we're talking about Ascension of the Cybermen, the latest episode of Doctor Who, and the penultimate episode of this series. So, we're going to go in order of all the categories like we usually do. Do you want to start first, Jack, on the Doctor in this episode?
I don't like the 13th Doctor very much, and I feel bad, but she's kind of like the inverse of the 6th Doctor, where the 6th Doctor was an asshole on the outside, and then deep down he was kind of nice, whereas the 13th Doctor's quite nice on the outside, where you drill down to it, he's kind of a jerk.
Yeah, but it's like almost unintentional, where like you have like the socially awkward scenes and stuff. You know, the one I'm talking about with Graham's cancer. You know, I'm not quite sure where they're going with her character. I thought they were doing something interesting a bit earlier in the series, and there's flashes of that in some episodes. Like I thought last episode she was actually really good, but I feel they took a step back in this one again. Although I am liking that she's got a bit more bite to her now than she perhaps had in previous episodes.
I mean, even if she's like not particularly likable, there is at least more to her than there was last series when she was just kind of nice.
Yeah, it's at least a bit more interesting. I mean, there's at least something to talk about this series. Do you have any thoughts on this, Connor and George?
I mean, for me, I think I just compare it to Series 11 too much, which is only natural because we've only got like a series and a half to base, well, almost 2 series to base Jodie on now. But I feel like just generally in Series 12, I'm enjoying her as the Doctor a lot more than I did in Series 11. Now, I know that might not be saying much for some people, but I still just, I love when I can see that side of 13 where she does snap. Like when she shouted at Ryan, I did a little bit of a fist bump because I was like, come on, about time, they are annoying sometimes, these companions. So naturally, you'd be expecting her to bite occasionally. And, we've had a little bit about this series, but towards the sort of more personal stuff with the Cybermen and obviously, Gallifrey in the next story, I'm hoping to expect a little bit more of that sort of more abrasive, more serious side of this Doctor. And I'm feeling that side of Jodie's performance is more Doctor-like than the sort of happy-go-lucky style we had last series. But I mean, that's just my opinion.
No, absolutely. Because I didn't like the style they went for last series at all. It never really felt like her Doctor was challenged. She just felt like overly happy and nice all the time. And I quite like that her Doctor's got a bit of bite to her. Now, there's still a long way to go before I can say I like this Doctor. But there have been episodes in this series where I've enjoyed it, which is a big step up. And yeah, it still needs more work, and her dialogue definitely needs to become more consistently good, because a lot of the dialogue in this series has still been crap, while separate from Series 11 has still been crap in some episodes. And I think this one has to be one of them as well, considering there's like just ridiculously expositional moments, like when she says, "Oh, you grew up in war," as if like we didn't already get that from what he just said. And there was another one, well, what did you say? "Oh yeah, that's what I call an inner conflict." It's like, you didn't need to spell that out for us. Like, we can work that out from what he just said. And that's been a recurring pattern of dialogue throughout the Chibnall era, that nothing is left unspelled out. Connor, you've been quiet.
Oh yeah, I'm just listening to what you guys will have to say. So how I feel about the Doctor in this story, it's interesting. Because when we get to other characters later on, I'll be able to sort of elaborate on what I mean, but this episode for me had a lot of clashing. For example, when it comes to Jodie, I quite like some of the intention in the writing for her, not necessarily the exposition of the dialogue, but in terms of where Chibnall wants to take the character, I'm liking some of the intention. However, it's odd because I really liked her performance last week in The Haunting of Villa Diodati. I really, really liked it. And then this week, I don't know, there was something that felt a bit off to me. It just... Because, for example, the scene that everyone talks about from last week, where she was being very direct with the companions, that worked. Whereas I feel like when she snapped this week, there was something off about it, and I think it might just be the fact that I think Jodie's got a very, very good at being direct, but maybe not being good at being quite sort of, what's the word? Maybe a bit. She's not very good at being like an unsettled doctor, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like her best more sort of serious moments are when she's controlled rather than when she's uncontrolled. And I think that there was something about the performance this week that felt a bit off to me, which sort of undercut what Chibnall was trying to do with her. And, you know, I wouldn't say she was terrible or anything, but yeah, there was definitely something off about it, and it didn't feel as well executed as last week for me.
I completely agree. And to kind of build on what you said about clashing, there was another bit where, like, you know, she was being in this more serious mode. Like, the directing was in this very serious mode. It was very gritty, but she still said fan. And it was a bit like, I mean, I always hate that word whenever they say it, but it was even more jarring in that context than it has been throughout the whole series.
I think the fan thing's just one of those things where, like, I mean, I didn't like it the first time, but, like, it would just be weirdly jarring if she said, like, gang or team, like, now, or just anything along those lines now. Like, when she said fam, I didn't really think anything of it because I've heard it so much now throughout the last two series that I'm just like, well, that's just something she says. That's just what she referred to them as. So I don't actually, for me, I just don't, as much as I don't like it, I've just stopped caring, I guess.
Yeah, I am resigned to just, like, not massively connecting with the Doctor. Like, I can't necessarily, like, they're taking it in a particular direction that is not a direction which I love, but they've got an idea and they're going with it, and I'm not going to begrudge them.
No, we must complain about every time they use fan.
Inevitably, so there has to be a Doctor which has to be your least favourite, and 13 is mine.
But they seem to have had about 4 least favourites in a row for me. It's very depressing. I haven't liked any Doctor very much since Eccleston. It's not fun. But yeah, no, it's disappointing because last week I finally started to warm to the direction they were taking, and I thought, oh, maybe next series she might actually come good. But this has just been yet another step back. I think we've said our piece on the 13th Doctor, so we can move on to the companions in this episode. Would you like to start, Connor?
All right, so what I was saying before about clashing, it's interesting how I mentioned how I liked some of the intentions for the Doctor, but not necessarily the performance, because I kind of feel the opposite with Yaz, in that I feel like a lot of the writing around her, this whole storyline in this episode, with the way Chibnall was writing it, was very forced. And I'm not saying that I didn't necessarily appreciate the idea that he had for her sort of taking this almost leadership role in this episode, but I just felt like a lot of the dialogue, a lot of the way Chibnall was trying to really bring her into this massive spotlight just didn't feel right. But the one thing I will say is I really liked the performance from Amanda Gill. I thought she actually brought a sort of different intensity than what she usually has. So it's a bit odd because, again, I'm feeling very conflicted about her as well. And it was interesting just thinking about it. But yeah, that for me, that whole storyline with Graham and Yaz going on that sort of, I suppose, that side plot, it was very, very, very bogged down with, technical stuff, if you would say. And, we've gotten that before. But the problem I have is that because Chibnall has the need to have to explain everything going on in words, it just sort of makes it really hard for me to enjoy. He's not very interesting when it comes to these sorts of things. And, like, the one thing that was really holding it up for me was obviously Man of Gill, her performance, and also the special effects as well of the sort of the space scenes I really liked. But just the whole storyline itself, all the characters they were with, I didn't care about. And like I said, a lot of the way Chibnall was trying to put her in the spotlight just didn't feel right. It was very strange. That whole side plot to me, I just didn't really care about, so unfortunately. But yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, the companions were all right in the story. There was nothing particularly wrong with them, but I don't know. I didn't feel they were that great either. Like, especially when Yaz says, "Ooh, Graham O'Brien, you've changed." I don't understand. Like, is Graham meant to have changed that much since he's joined the TARDIS? Because I can't really think of that many differences other than overcoming his grief for Grace. That's the only development he's had.
Yeah. For me, like when Yaz said that sort of Graham about like, "Oh, you've changed," I sort of sat back and looked at it a little bit, and I did talk about this in my own video, but I think that they haven't changed much, but I still look at it and go, well, Yaz is, she does feel as if there's some sort of change there. I feel like she's a little bit, I mean, the whole taking the leadership thing, I know that wasn't very well developed, it's not very much of a transition, more just from A to B very quickly. I feel like Graham and the whole grief thing, I feel like he has a little bit. But then, for me, and it's always this one thing I'm really getting annoyed about this series, is Ryan, because I can't stand Ryan. I just don't connect with him at all. He had one job in this episode, that was to run away, and he fucked that up. So what? It can't do anything. I'm really trying my best with this, and I am liking Yaz, despite very little she's given. I am liking Graham, even in this episode and throughout this series. But with Ryan, I'm just not getting it. There was one line about chips in Can You Hear Me, which I liked. That was about it. Torsten Cole is trying his best, but I don't think he's got the accent, and then it's also being written to sound a bit thick as well, which is just really off-putting. And it's just, again, he was given absolutely nothing to do this in this episode, but I think just generally I'm just not enjoying his character as much. And it's just, as Series 12's gone on, the sort of less I've liked him and the less I've warmed to the character. So, but I'm fine with like Yaz and Graham.
Well, I can kind of see what you're saying there, actually, because I really liked Ryan last series. He got a good bit of development, and I felt his interaction with Graham worked well. But you're right, this series has been a massive step back for him. Graham's been up and down, but still fine. Yaz, a bit better. But Ryan is just, like, completely distanced himself from any development he was having, and instead just seems to be the deliverer of shit jokes. Yeah. That seems to be his only function this series.
The thing is with Ryan, though, last series, the story arc was about, like, grief and grace and all that sort of thing, and the whole granddad thing like that was directly tied with him as a focus point, so that felt fine. I did enjoy him last series, but this series, because he's not part of the arc at all, none of the companions are part of the arc, so now we get to see them for what they are, and Ryan has been written to be a bit thick. And I mean, even from episode 1 when he made a joke about not looking like Hugh Jackman, it's that sort of thing where it just falls flat and it's like, oh Christ. So I can't deny, and as much as there wasn't much to do in this episode, I was sitting there with one of my mates, and once he got shot at by the Cybermen, we were both chanting, "Kill him! Kill him! Kill him! Kill him!" I'm trying my best to like him, but I think at this point, how many episodes are we in now for Ryan? Like 20?
But here's the thing.
I'm just done.
After the episode, I was on Twitter and somebody said, "Why are the baby companions acting like they know stuff?" And then somebody replied saying, "They're not baby companions, they've been in for 20 episodes." And I feel that sort of sums up the companions in the Chibnall era. Being in for 20. I think Chibnall somewhat brought on one of the things which didn't work so well from Classic Who, which was having companions who kind of suck and don't really achieve
They've
much.
been in more episodes than Donna Noble at this point.
Yes.
Oh my Jesus! God. Yeah. Well, I'd say, as a Classic Who fan, would disagree with what you said. But if you narrowed it down to 80s companions, apart from Ace, I could definitely see what you're saying there. They kind of do feel like a Peter Davison TARDIS team in the sense that there's just too many of them, not enough development, very one note, and don't change that much.
Rabbits.
But yeah, it's a shame because the companions were one of the only highlights of Series 11, and then they've kind of went very downhill this series. Anyway, we'll move on from this now onto the Cybermen. Would you like to start, George?
Right, I don't even know where to start with Cybermen because there's a few things I like, there's things I don't like.
Shall we get the head?
We'll have plenty of time to talk about this, so just go for whatever you want to go first.
Right. Okay, well, start with the heads then. Right, okay. I don't mind the idea of cyber drones, and realistically, they could have looked like anything. And
That's the problem.
it's fair to say I was surprised.
They got some of the old voice changer helmets out of storage.
Yeah, basically. I like to think that wasn't CGI and they just stuck a few bits of old merchandise in a can and just fucking like pointed it into the sky. I didn't mind it. I was sitting there grinning because it's. I think the way they wanted to go with it is I feel like they wanted to try and make it somewhat fun. I don't think they were trying to be serious with it. Surely not. I mean.
Well, that's the dramatic
direction.
scene where the Doctor's plan goes up and terrible.
That's meant to be a dramatic scene. Yeah. The direction makes it feel dramatic. The music makes it feel dramatic.
Chris, when he was talking behind the scenes, he said, I thought of this idea of these Cyberman heads flying about and I just couldn't resist. It's almost as if it's like he knows how stupid this sounds.
I mean, there's two ways they kind of could have made these Cybermen heads work. One is, like, not have them be Cyberman heads and make them be, like, flying Cybermats or something. It might still look a little silly, but it wouldn't look as ridiculous.
Flying Cybermans!
Well, just a kind of Cyberman-ish design. Like, not just a Cyberman head. But another way it could have worked is to actually make them scary and to actually give them some body horror, is have the flying Cyberman heads try to attach themselves to people. Wouldn't that be more interesting? Wouldn't that actually bring some of the body horror the Cybermen meant to have into this episode?
Yeah. I said on Twitter, what if one tried to attach to one's head and then left off and it ripped their head off?
Oh, I mean, they would never do that, but that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. It's weird. Thing is, and I said this on Twitter as well, like, as much as I don't like the whole flying head thing, I would take Cyberman head drones any day over a flying Mondasian Cyberman, okay? Any day.
But I think that looks stupid, but not as stupid as this.
Well, yes, it looks stupid, but in terms of, like, canon and shit, like, I just...
Can't we just have neither?
Cyberman, it just annoyed me on, like, a sort of level of being a fan. This is just like, well, that's just like a Cyberman thing that I just don't have to think about.
At least we're probably not going to see them ever again.
I mean,
it's going to be that one beautiful moment.
Just you wait till we have a lovely establishing shot of Gallifrey with all these sort of Cyberman heads just sort of...
Let me tell you why I do think the Cyberman heads are an actual problem. Because there's been so much build-up to this finale. There's been such dramatic weight in the previous episode, which got quite dark and brought up some of these great ideas. And then the first thing we see in this episode, the first thing we have to start building up the tension and getting us invested in what has been advertised as a big finale, is these ridiculous-looking flying heads.
However, I will jump to the pre-title scene of the Cyberman head in space and the sort of opening monologue. That was beautiful. I love it.
Oh, yeah, all right.
I thought that was brilliant, especially the transition
to the
title
sort
of thing. Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that.
That's going to be mean for Jeff now.
Oh, I've already seen... Doctor Who Pooper thing, I've been all over that. But, yeah, no, I think... With the Cybermen in general, though, I think... Weirdly enough, as much as I don't like the Cybus designs, I had this real lovely burst of nostalgia seeing them to Cybermen. I love that. I love the lone Cyberman design. I think that's brilliant, and I love that the presence that I think it's Patrick O'Kane, I think the actor has on screen, really just brings something new to the whole Cybermen mythos. And the new Cybermen look fine. I like the fact that they've gone back to the whole big earmuff head things. But it's better than Nightmare in Silver design, and I do like that design, the new one. But I just they're still it still seems a bit too shiny and a bit too modern for me. But as long as they're not dashing about like the Flash or flying, I'm fine.
The new designs are good, apart from the spikes on the shoulders. They've got spikes on their shoulders.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel this is time for me to go into a little bit of a tirade because I really didn't like the Cybermen in this episode quite a lot. So let me just kind of go over methodically why. So to start with, last episode I thought was brilliant. They were bringing a new take on the Cybermen. They got the body horror back. It was all good. And that lone Cyberman character in this episode was still good. He didn't exactly develop any further than he had in the previous story, but, it's still a decent character. But the Cyber bringing back, I don't know why they did that. I mean, maybe it was just nostalgia, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, whatever. That's something I can just kind of take or leave. But I hate the fact they said delete. I mean, it's just that was a stupid catchphrase to begin with, and the fact that that's now just being considered something worth bringing back is like, ugh. But let's get into the real meat of why I didn't like them in this story. They were just a generic robot army again. What I liked about the previous story, it was going into like the individuality, somebody choosing to be a Cyberman, having the body horror, having a lot of the psychology of people who choose to become Cybermen, and that was really cool. And in this episode, they were just generic robot army again, because all of them were just cladded in armor, stomping around. You didn't really see any, like, you know, sense that they were going to convert anybody. And in fact, in this episode, you feel as if they could have just been replaced by the Daleks, because they don't say their mission is to convert all the humans. They say their mission is to destroy all the humans. It's like, what? Have you completely forgotten what the point of the Cybermen is? What makes them scary isn't that they go around killing people. There's so many other Doctor Who species that do that. The point is that they make you like them. And all of the other body horror stuff that goes out that I've explained a million times in other videos. And it just didn't do that here. It was a real big letdown after last episode.
I would argue that the new design, with it only being the last... I would say it's only in the last sort of 5 minutes of the episode. So I don't think there's enough to sort of judge it on yet. It's going to be what you said it was. It's going to be a generic Cyberman army in the next one. However, I think that's just... It's just the way the Cybermen have gone. Unfortunately, I love what Moffat did in Series 10.
So why can't we have more of
trust
that?
me, it does. I don't know. Because I'm not the showrunner. And it really hurts to say, like, I like something Moffat did. Trust me. It's just... I still feel like I'm comparing it to other stuff, like the Rusty Davies Cyberman stories and some of the Moffat ones before Series 10. And it still does kind of hold up to me. I still enjoy
even
this.
like Rise of the Cybermen was very heavy on the emphasis of body horror and conversion and stuff like that. This has none of that. This just treats them like the Daleks for the most part.
I think it would count. I think it would count for a lot if they got the actors to do a physical performance more like the 60s Cybermen, that kind of slow, deliberate, but not robotic.
I mean, that would
kind
help,
of movement.
but my main criticism here is the fact that there's nothing in the script about them being like Cybermen. Because they're not trying to convert people, they're trying to kill people, that's not what the Cybermen are about.
Is that the point of the whole... I mean, I know it's a stupid story to begin with, but the whole thing of the Cyber Wars, is that not... Because I haven't looked really much into it.
I thought the whole point of the Cyber Wars was that they're trying to capture as many humans as possible to convert them, not to kill them.
Initially, but this is the whole thing of like what New Who's trying to do with the Cybermen, which debatable. I don't like it personally. I'd much prefer the body horror stuff, and that's why I kind of love what they did in the last episode, with everything from the performance to the sort of movement and the emotion behind the character.
Absolutely.
I thought it was perfect. You can't have that with every Cyberman, as much as it would be great. But I don't know. There's levels of it, but I think just from the thing is, you can't downgrade it now. I would much prefer the Cybermen to move around like they did, even in like Classic Who, where they marched, they just sort of walked around. They were their own sort of people, even if they were sort of cyborgy type things. I would love them to do that again, but I think because you're so far in now, like with the Cybus ones and the Nightmare and Silver ones, it would feel like a downgrade to permanently make the Cybermen.
But everybody liked World at the time.
Yeah, but as a sort of, I know, I would agree, I loved it. But best Cyberman story in New Who, but I don't know. I'm trying to justify something that I don't believe in, so it's really difficult. But
my main criticism is with the script here rather than the designs. Anyway, go on, Colin.
I've got something to say. Take into consideration that in the classic series, like in the 80s, for example, when they took away a lot of that body horror, what they did was that they actually gave the Cybermen characters, and they were like speaking characters, like kind of with their own thoughts. I think that might be what's probably missing from these Cybermen, is that if you're not going to have the body horror aspect, you might as well, do something with... And I guess we do have the lone Cybermen. We do have the lone Cybermen, but having all of them just sort of be this hive mind is a little bit strange. And I know we obviously had it before, and I have actually liked some of the instances we've had it before, but because... I mean, I suppose maybe we'll see in the next episode if they do anything with it, but I don't know, I just feel like there is something missing from this sort of new cyber warrior thing. Like, I'm interested to see where they take it from now.
What's missing is any impetus to convert. It's all about killing. Whereas that's the Cybermen are about conversion. That is their primary instinct, to convert people, because they think that's what's helping them. That's their crusade.
I'm holding back because there was a line from Jodie which says, like, you've got to get out of here because Cybermen, you're human, like the Cybermen will convert you. So I'm holding out hope because, it was written, the script was written by one man, that could mean that that's what they're trying to plan on doing the finale, maybe. Although part of me, as stupid as it sounds, and I totally do agree with you on every level about what the Cybermen should be, logically. However, from now, I think with all the whole timeless child shit and all the Gallifrey stuff and the Master and all this sort of stuff, I feel like for the finale now, it would be too much to have these Cybermen going around trying to convert people.
Oh yeah, no, that's going to get very...
Especially
I'm
when
saying they should
it's
have done it in this
yeah.
episode.
Oh, no, totally agree, yeah, absolutely.
The main problem I had with this episode, other than that, is the fact that what actually got developed here, because we already had all of like the stakes and what the Lone Cyberman wanted to develop in the previous episode. So what actually happened in this episode? Because nothing really changed. It was just set piece after set piece.
This is definitely a transition episode. There's no doubt about that. For me, anyway, it was very much a transition episode. It was... I mean, I suppose there were some important things that happened, like, in terms of progressing the plot, but you're definitely right, Dylan, in the sense that there is a lack of... what's the word? Like, this doesn't feel anywhere near as important as other times we've had a penultimate episode to a series, if that makes sense.
It feels as if Jodie could have just landed on that beach at the beginning of the story and it wouldn't really have had an impact.
I think for me, I'd rather... And it's interesting to see how Chibnall's going about this sort of final two-parter thing, but obviously Moffat had a bit of a track record with making great penultimate stories and then sort of ruining it with the last one. I'm holding out hope that this finale will be good, and if it is, then maybe it'll be worth it. But if the finale's crap and the penultimate episode's a bit crap, then I'll be a bit annoyed.
Yeah, it's like at least with Moffat we had the penultimate one to look forward to. Anyway, sorry, go on. Right, so has anybody else got anything to say quickly before we move on?
Not really.
No.
All right.
I didn't really feel that much about the Cybermen in this. It just felt like it was just a setup for them to arrive, really.
Generic robot army. Nothing was really developed from the previous story any further.
Yeah.
It was a waste.
Better next time.
Well, I mean, next time's just going to be all about the Time Lords. The Cybermen are probably going to barely feature. But then I might be proved wrong, but I get that hunch. Anyways.
I mean, it is apparently, I heard somewhere that next week is meant to be a 65-minute episode. I could be wrong on that. But if it is, that's a good thing.
Well, we can find out if we go onto the BBC website.
I think it's 65 to 70 minutes, because I think it starts at 6:50.
All right, well, that's fine. That's better. It probably needs the time, considering how much it's trying to do. Like, a whole cyber war story at the same time as law-changing shit.
It's an hour and 10 minutes. So, 70 minutes.
Nice.
Right, that's good.
So that's good.
Anyway, so we're going to move on to side characters now. I know there's probably not going to be a whole lot to say, but it's kind of the last aspect of the episode we haven't discussed. Would you like to start, Jack?
I mean, so the people from the last humans that weren't necessarily particularly distinct from each other or particularly in depth, but I think functionally they were quite a good portrait of desperate people who are on the run from a threat which they fear very much. So I'm not particularly attached to them, but they did the job, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen worse. They function well enough, even if they're not very interesting. They kind of have a couple of quirks. Although I wonder, are they trying to build up that middle-aged woman as a love interest for Graham? Because that seemed like what they were trying to do there.
That was weird.
She just instantly has a crush on him after meeting him. It reminded me of
what they did with Nardole in the Dr. Falls.
God.
Except it was I don't know, it just felt very out of nowhere.
Not as out of nowhere as that, but still out of nowhere.
The thing is with Nardole is that he'd kind of been set up as this really goofy character. So having this sort of weird cartoonish romance thing in the Dr. Falls didn't feel as out of place to me as this. I don't know why. It's because to me, Graham is a much more real character, and him being put into a storyline like that just feels wrong. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bit odd.
I don't think it's even going to go anywhere. I think it's just a throwaway line, and that's that.
Oh, speaking of throwaway
I-
lines, there's one thing we forgot to mention, and there was one point when because I did film a reaction to this. It's not up yet, but I noticed Graham was speaking to her, and he said something, and it sounded like he fluffed his line, and I was like, did he fluff his line like Arnold did?
Yeah.
And then I saw on Twitter people were like actually re-uploaded it, and it's almost like he almost said he was the Doctor, and I was like, wait, what's going on here?
Graham is the Doctor. Graham is the timeless child.
He says I'm the the normal person or whatever he was banging on about. But I still vouch the fact he was probably going to say dog's bollocks, but couldn't. Like, I'm the dog's bollocks.
That's great.
Whew. Yeah. Also, one thing we haven't talked about yet is that whole storyline in the past with Brendan.
I mean, there's not really much to say because we don't know where it's going yet.
It's gonna be Time Lord related.
I must say the last scene where they say, I think you need to come with us into the back office was a very good little scene. That was quite creepy.
Yeah, that was probably the creepiest part of the episode. The Cybermen weren't creepy at all.
Just the way he just silently follows them.
Yeah.
And gets handcuffed to the chair.
Yeah, I think you do have a point though that everything that happened in this episode with that storyline is all going to depend on where it goes next week.
Yeah, because it didn't really do much this week. It wasn't the focus at all. So we'll see what happens.
Again, like we said,
that's one thing you can only judge next
This is such a transition episode in every way, you know?
Barely anything happened in it. Nothing was really progressed. Nothing really happened.
How many storytelling balls has Chibnall thrown at the air? So we've got, what is the timeless child? Why did the Master destroy Gallifrey? What's going to happen with the Cybermen? Who's the Irish guy? And who was the other Doctor from Future of the Judoon?
Yeah.
And also,
this is feeling like a muff-up finale.
It'll all get brought into one.
And also,
hopefully.
One question I've always had is, why is Jodie suddenly, really different in this series for no reason? It's very weird. She's doing some very bizarre things. Like when she fed the Masters to the Nazis, and when she told not the Rachnos, but the other one, she told them to, that her blood would be spilled. I'm like, what's going on here?
I was under the impression that was due to the whole Gallifrey thing, although it is still pretty weak.
It wasn't because the Gallifrey.
Did you say the Doctor fed the Master to the Nazis?
Come here, Nazis, get your Master.
I mean, have you seen Spyfall Part 2?
Yeah, I mean that's fair enough.
Yeah, she's like, hey, you're brown. These people don't like you now. It's like, whoa, okay.
Yeah. You see, that moment would have probably worked better with somebody like Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, who's a bit dark. Whereas when Jodie did it, it felt whoa.
The thing is, I don't mind them doing something like that with the Doctor. I just want a reason why, because it doesn't seem like it's reactionary. Because I would have thought that it would have been quite, clever to have the Gallifrey thing be a trigger for why she would do this sort of thing. But it's not. It's not a trigger. It just happens out of nowhere, and it's like, oh, okay, this is a bit weird.
And you see, coming into this, I think everybody, including myself, was under the impression that Chibnall was quite a good character writer. Boy, oh boy, how wrong we were. There's about 2 good characters. And even then, one of them went downhill this series.
Anyway, yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is that this episode sort of relies on what happens next episode, and we have no idea whether that will be a functional finale or the next Hell Bent.
Oh god, this is exactly what we're saying about Fugitive of the Judoon, though. It's like everything is relying on the last
substanceless.
Episode.
Absolutely substanceless, both of those episodes. This one's slightly less substanceless, but still pretty substanceless.
I don't think we're going to get the next Hell Bent. I mean, even
probably not.
Looking at the promo, the inside of the Citadel stuff, and hopefully, because the CGI budget now is, just much better, I'm hoping that means we're actually going to see some proper, like, Gallifrey stuff. Right, and special effects and all that sort of stuff.
I see what you mean, but, like, I mean, a lot of people were pretty hyped when they saw the trailers for Hellbent, so you never know.
I was very apprehensive of Hellbent, and I was proven to be right. I think I was burned too many times by finales at that point, no matter how good the penultimate one is. Anyway, let's move on to final thoughts before we go off piste. Would you like to start, Connor?
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't really a fan of this episode, to be completely honest. I saw other people liked it, and fair enough if you did, but for me it was just it just wasn't what I really wanted coming off The Haunting of Villa Diodati. I found a lot of it to be sort of needless exposition. There was a lot of, like, it was filled in time with a lot of technical stuff. A lot of it felt like it was transitioning from one point to the next without actually doing anything that interesting with itself. The Cybermen, like, the drones were silly, and then the actual cyber warriors themselves were just this was sort of just a little bit of an introduction, and then that was about it. We didn't really learn anything new about the lone Cybermen. The performances and the writing clashed. And I think the biggest strength for me was actually the CGI itself. That's probably the biggest strength I have, because everything in space looked great. It's just, unfortunately, I didn't really care for any of the side characters or any of the people that were really involved in it. It's not the worst thing ever, but for me, this is just an episode that I really just don't care about, and I'm much more interested in next week when things actually start to happen. So, yeah. Do we still do ratings on the channel, Dylan?
It's optional, because I don't bother, but you're welcome to if you want to.
Yeah, well, I suppose I will. I'll give it a 5.5.
All right, George, you want to go?
I've got very mixed feelings about this one. My first reaction was incredibly positive, which is what my own reviews is sort of my initial sort of jump on. I've just seen the episode, wrote some notes down. Here's what I think, and I think my initial reaction was incredibly positive. I think now I've had time to think about it. Now I've had time to distill, and probably for my updated listing, I'm probably gonna have to change how my sort of actual out of 10 score, but I don't know. I like the episode. I do, and I honestly do like what they did, and I still feel like it's better than some Cyberman stories we've had over the years. Obviously not including the Series 10 finale.
That's not very hard.
Incredible. It was never going to beat that, though. It was never going to beat that. And I quite liked what they tried to do with it, but realistically, it's just it's a path that doesn't answer any questions. It's just adding more questions and building it up to go, hey, this is an episode where we're going to tell you about all the questions that are going to next week. So tune in for that. So I'm looking forward to next week. Yeah, I'm buzzing for next week. I'm actually really looking forward to Sunday's episode, because I feel like we're going to get some stuff answered, some canon changing stuff. And you know what? I love chaos, so I'm just going to sit back and just kill myself laughing at just the mad shit that's going to happen.
You're
I can't wait.
Next week.
I cannot wait. It's going to be great. I don't care what they do. I don't care. I don't care. I'm just going to enjoy it, and I'm going to have a laugh with it. This episode was fine, but could have been a lot better. Could have been a lot worse. It's fine.
All right. Do you want to go, Jack?
Yeah, I agree with George. It was fine. It was a decent lead into finding out what's inside Chibnall's mystery box next week. It's a definite step up from the Battle of Raskor and Kolos.
I mean, you always give it these comparisons to shit episodes, like, oh, well, at least it was better than this incredibly AIDS episode.
But I think it was better than Love and Monsters, though.
We're comparing it to the previous finale from this executive, this showrunner. It's better than that. So
yeah, it's better than Time of the Rani too. It's like it's not relevant.
Well, he's meant to.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jack. Go on.
No, yeah, I mean, I've not got much to say. Let's see how it resolves.
All right, so this wasn't an awful episode, but it was very, very far from a good episode. All of the interesting stuff they brought up with, like, the Lone Cyberman last story didn't go anywhere this episode, and I feel that they woefully mishandled the Cybermen as they were almost like the Daleks in the way that they were just, they only wanted to kill. There was nothing about the conversion, nothing about the body horror, and they just weren't interesting. And although the lone Cybermen didn't develop at all, the Cybermen didn't really do anything. The side characters weren't very interesting. The main characters didn't really develop. So what actually happened in this story? It was just a series of CGI set pieces, which admittedly the CGI was pretty, but that's not enough to keep me interested in a Doctor Who episode. I thought it was pretty poor. Not much really happened. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't anywhere close to being anything of quality. And honestly, as I said earlier, if Jodie had just landed on that beach right at the beginning and the portal opened, the Master had jumped out, not much would have changed, because nothing was developed over the course of this episode, other than maybe that little Irish subplot. That's the only thing that went anywhere, and even then we have no idea what that's about, and it only took about 4 minutes of screen time. Yeah, so I didn't like this one at all. It was another very substanceless episode, which we've now had 2 of in this series. I seriously hope the finale's good. It's going to at the very least be interesting, even if it's not good, so I suppose there's that. So yeah, next week it'll be at least be interesting.
Fingers crossed. Really, right?
It's going to be filled to the brim. Like, really think about everything it has to do.
Although knowing Chibnall, he could make the most exciting thing boring if he tried his best at it.
Can you imagine if the other Doctor is not actually to do with this plot line at all?
He's just saving it for next series.
Resolved next series.
Well, I can just
imagine him just like, oh, you're lying. Like that just turns out you're just lying. Just fooled you.
I can just imagine like a scene where a companion's dying, and I can imagine Ryan going, "Oh no."
Well, isn't Tosin Cole attached to another series filming this year?
Oh, okay. Well, he's the one that's getting killed, and he's like, "Oh no."
And on that note, I think we'll end this panel discussion. Thank you for coming on, Jack, Connor, and George.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Yeah, so I'll see you back next week for the finale. I forgot the name of the finale. Oh wait, it's called The Timeless Child. I remember the episode name this week.
Children.
Yes! Oh, what? Okay, no, I've got it wrong. I've got it wrong again. These episode names are just shit.